This is Ibrox. Hello and welcome to your new weekly instalment of This is Ibrox. It's your Rangers podcast, and my name is Scott Paterson. As always, you're very welcome. Joining us on this week's podcast is the return of Andrew Anderson and Patrick Caskie. They join me, and a special guest, freelance journalist Andrew Dickson, currently working for Sky Sports and also a regular contributor to the Rangers Matchday programme. Andrew, hello, how are you? Welcome back.
Evening. Yeah, thanks for having me. Nice to see you.
So we should say this podcast is brought to you as always by Triple H Mortgages, the one-stop shop for all your mortgage and mortgage insurance needs. You can call them right now on 01225 31888, and you can speak to Craig Bryce. His email is craig.bryce@hhhmortgages.com. They're available on the World Wide Web. All the W's, hhhmortgages.com. Similar address for Facebook if you speak to them. Be sure to mention us at This is Ibrox, and the guys in there will look after you very well indeed. We do have a giveaway with these guys just now. We've got a Champions Top to give away from last season, 55 Champions Top. Cracker, really, really nice. All we have to do is follow ourselves on Twitter at This is Ibrox, themselves, HHH Mortgages, and retweet and tag one of your chums in, and you've got a chance of winning that 55 top. So we look forward to announcing the winner for that mid-September. That's when you need to get to your bits and pieces done by. So, big weekend for Rangers. Lots and lots to speak about tonight. What we will do first, Andrew Dickson, I think I'll start with you. We will go back to the Europa League draw for the groups. Rangers, of course, got through after a hot and sticky night in Alashkert, I think it's fair to say. And the draw for the next round paired us with Lyon, Sparta Prague and Brøndby. A kind draw, I would suggest.
Yeah, I would say so. I think we've obviously got the benefit, and obviously we'll come on to it later on, but we've got the benefit of hindsight with having had the Old Firm game since then as well. If you go back to the Alashkert game, the most important thing is just getting through. And I know people were unhappy about the performance and thought it was very flat. Clearly, we didn't probably have a real feel for just how tough it was over there, you know, kind of temperatures in the mid-30s and only really dropping down to about 30 degrees by the end of the game as well, which it does make a bit of a difference. I mean, you know, we saw Alashkert at Ibrox, who did nothing really, you know, and did well to come away with a 1-0 defeat, for all that Rangers were a bit kind of leggy at times in that game as well. But, you know, when you then go over there and you get the 6-7 hour flight, I mean, I've never been to Armenia before, but I've flown to Georgia, which is similar sort of area. That was a 6-hour flight, and, you know, it does take its toll on athletes, and obviously the club took on the kind of same, they stuck to the same time zones as they were in the UK, I think, and the same kind of food eating patterns, and stayed overnight after the game to make the recovery was better and all that kind of stuff, which clearly helped. So, you know, with the benefit of hindsight, having then seen the Old Firm game on Sunday, you say, well, it's actually been a really good week overall. If you go back to Ross County as well, which is a kind of 400-mile round trip up there, and, you know, potentially slightly tricky too. So you come through the Alashkert game, you've got and I think we don't really need to go over the game itself because it wasn't great. Fine. Robbie McCrory, I would say, looked pretty composed in that game as well, and then did the same again on Sunday, which was really good to see. But otherwise, there weren't too many talking points away from the red card in the first half. The draw itself, you know, Lyon. I mean, Lyon are a decent team, of course they are. They've been in and out of the Champions League over the last few years as well, so they will clearly be like Benfica, where last season they'll be the other team that Rangers will be expected to maybe share the top two with, and then the other two teams, you know, Brøndby. I mean, Danish football, I don't think you can underestimate them. I haven't seen very much at all of Brøndby, but clearly we've seen Copenhagen do quite well in recent seasons. They won at Celtic not so long ago, or against Celtic over the two legs certainly, and I'm sure Brøndby, being up at the top end of the table, we've seen Midtjylland as well, who, Rangers beat them quite convincingly recently, but then Celtic struggled against them. So there is a certain standard in Danish football. You would expect the teams in the kind of top 3, 4, 5 in Denmark are probably going to be similar sort of level to what you get in the top 3, 4, 5 in Scotland. So quite a tricky one. And then Sparta, I mean, we saw the games with Slavia last season. I think if Rangers had played Slavia at a different point last season, they'd probably have won the games. I think Rangers kind of ran out of steam a little bit, just didn't really turn up. The Kamara incident, which we spoke about the last time I was on the pod, clearly that was at the end of the second leg, so it didn't really have any bearing on the result. But Slavia deserved to win those games. They're the kind of slightly better team out of the two Prague sides. So, but Sparta again obviously have won 4-1 at home and away to Celtic, and clearly I think one of the games. I mean, I don't know the ins and outs in terms of who was first choice and second choice in their team, but I think one of the teams that played Celtic was sort of more of a reserve team almost, and still they managed to get a 4-1 result. So, they were in the Champions League qualifiers too, lost to Monaco, which there's no shame in that at all. They'll all be tough tests. I've got no doubt about that whatsoever. But yeah, I mean, like you said a couple of minutes ago, I've got no doubt that that's a group Rangers should be looking to go through from. And of course, as well, if you win the group, you're actually straight into the last 16 now with the new format of the competition too, which, that's a great incentive. Obviously, if you can get top two, great. And then if you finish second, you go through and play a Champions League dropout, which is a bit harder. So that really incentivises first place a bit more. Can it be done? I don't see why Rangers shouldn't be looking to do that, because so far this season they've not been great. And yet, actually, if you look at results overall, they've not been too bad. Take away the two Malmo games and then the Dundee United result, which in any normal season can happen. It's been an okay start to the season, nothing more than that. But Rangers, I think, over the course of time will get better. And these games in the Europa League, I think they can certainly thrive in.
Patrick, you are our follower of all things European football, I think it's fair to say. We're a huge champion of all the good work you do, and I'm sure over the next couple of weeks, as that Europa League campaign gets underway, we'll see a lot of interesting stats from you. Leon are obviously the big hitters. I think it's quite safe to say we've obviously got experience of playing them before. I instantly remember the Benzema appearance at Ibrox, what feels like many, many years ago. He was excellent that night, and they will be a tough nut to crack. There's no two ways about that. But I think Andrew Dickson's absolutely right. I think it's a group we can look at and have a relevant, decent degree of confidence that we can certainly qualify for the group.
Yeah, I would corroborate all of what Andrew said. Interestingly, obviously, pretty high-profile move was Memphis Depay to Barcelona, who was far and above Leon's most influential player when it came to expected goals and expected assists. I think it's a drop-off between like 28 for him, which is the same as in the ballpark of what Morelos and Tavernier got, and Moussa Dembele's is 19, which is more comparable to Barisic and Cedric Etienne. So they're losing a massive chunk. Peter Bosch has come in, who we have experience with. He was the coach, I believe, when we played Leverkusen. They haven't quite hit the ground running under him. I think they've got 1 win, 2 draws and a loss in Ligue 1. I'd watched their game against Clermont Foot, who were just promoted from Ligue 2, who are no doubt a weaker team than Rangers, and they drew 3-3. So it'll be interesting. I think they have a really similar dynamic, as Andrew mentioned, to Benfica. It's a team that you'd expect to see in and around the Champions League. They have evident quality, but it's not a team in which we have to fear for our lives at home. It's a game in which you go away and you bite someone's hand off for a point, but at home, with all things unbalanced in a full Ibrox, I'm unsure what the situation with the away fans are. I'd back ourselves to at least get a point at home. Interesting with Brøndby is if the departure of Memphis Depay had a big impact on Leon. They've lost their 2 best players this summer. Jesper Lindstrom went to Frankfurt for 7.4 million, and then Lasse Vigne Christensen, who you might know from when he was at Fulham, also left to Belgium. So they've lost their 2 most influential men. They've retained their star striker Mikel Ure, who's by far their best player still. And they have an interesting American centre mid. They'll be, I think, similar to the dynamic we had against Midtjylland 2 years ago. I mean, obviously it's easy to make the connection with the nation, but I think that's a sort of tie which we should be aiming as a benchmark of 4 points from both legs. So a win at home, anything else but that is inexcusable. And I mean, when you go away, you take a point, but I really think we could be looking for a goal. And then Sparta, I watched their game against Česká Budějovice on Saturday rather. They look good. They're obviously in a Scottish connection. They obviously took Celtic to town last season. I was particularly impressed with their right winger, Daniel Moberg Carlson. It was quite tricky and dynamic, but again, they finished miles off Slavia last season. Kind of a similar dynamic to what we had last year. Slavia went unbeaten, much like ourselves, and then Sparta were trailing by 15 to 20 points. But I think given the fact on a playing-wise size, it's pretty much the best you could have asked for. You could have maybe asked for Dinamo Zagreb or Olympiacos at the one point, but also there's no far journeys. They're all in Western Europe. They're all relatively temperate climates. We're not going to have to go to Moscow in November like we did two or 3 years ago when we played Spartak. So if you'd given me this before the draw, I would have taken this 100%.
Andrew Anderson, we spoke on the podcast last week, and we basically asked I asked the guys if there was a preference to perhaps qualify for the group stages or get a good result in the Old Firm game on Sunday. We've got both, and I think you can't underestimate getting into those group stages for the fourth year in the bounce. And from a financial perspective, it's great. But as supporters, we look forward to another round of European football matches.
That's it, exactly. Scott, that's all you want to do is have your name in the hat come Friday for the draw.
Yeah.
And when you're watching the draw, all you're hoping for is don't fling us to the far end of Russia in the middle of November or December. Keep us local as you possibly can within Europe, and we've got what we asked for. And I totally agree with you. I think we spoke off camera a minute ago there. It is a winnable group. It's a very winnable group. As soon as it came out, I thought that is winnable, but then you start to doubt yourself. You think, am I being too cocky? Such as the results we've had in the last couple of years, especially in the group stages, I don't think that is too cocky. I think that's very realistic. Certainly to qualify out of it, we should be looking to win it as well. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely, I tend to agree. So we look forward to that first match against Lyon, 16th September, Thursday night. So should be something to look forward to indeed. Before we get on to the Old Firm game, of course, sandwiched in between the Alashkert game and the draw and the game at Ibrox yesterday, Andrew Dickson, we've had the COVID issue that has affected everyone all around the world, of course, from a footballing perspective. It could have really snookered our plans for those two big games, couldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, again, what I was saying about the performance over there, obviously COVID was a part of what happened in Armenia as well. I mean, every club's been affected to some extent, and up until now, Rangers really haven't had any issues at all. I mean, obviously I think Filip Helander had it last season.
Yeah.
Otherwise, most of Rangers' COVID issues were around the 5 players that went to the party. That was their biggest COVID issue last season. Otherwise, there wasn't really much in the way of problems for Rangers. So, you could argue it's probably a bit overdue that Rangers are going to have to deal with it. And what a way to have to deal with it. You lose your manager, your captain, your influential goalkeeper, the backup influential goalkeeper as well, and then 1 or 2 others. And obviously over in Armenia as well. On top of that, you had kind of 1 or 2 injuries. So Kent didn't travel and then was saved for the weekend. Unfortunately, it's just something we're going to have to live with. It could well happen again. Since he came back from Armenia, obviously Nathan Paterson was then deemed to have to isolate as well. Certainly that's what we've been told was the case anyway. We'll see what happens in the next couple of days as to whether he's actually isolating. But certainly it is something that has an effect, and not just in that situation. We have it coming into the start of the season when Morelos has to isolate at the hotel at Glasgow Airport, and you see him out doing laps of the car park. Different things are happening that 18 months ago, maybe not even 18 months ago, you would have thought were ludicrous situations, but that's just the way it is now. I think the club have handled it about as well as they can. They've had plenty of time to get ready for this situation unfolding should it unfold.
Yeah.
We've seen other clubs have to deal with it, and like anything else, they've probably learned on their feet as they've gone along from how other people have dealt with it both well and badly. So, it's one of those things. I think you can look at it now, and obviously considering the Old Firm game going the way it went, Rangers have pretty much got away with it on this occasion. I mean, it's not a thing where they've got away with it as in they shouldn't have, it's just a situation where, sometimes it really affects you and sometimes it doesn't. And in this I think Rangers haven't really suffered too much. It could have been a whole lot worse. You could have been out of the Europa League and losing the game yesterday, and then that makes the international break a really, really long couple of weeks. And on top of that as well, you have 2 defeats in your first 4 league games, and you're into the Conference League, which I know there was a little bit of apathy at first when Rangers dropped into the Europa League from the Champions League, but I think that excitement has built back up again. I think if Rangers had then dropped into the Conference League, I don't know if that excitement would have been quite the same. So, in that regard, the COVID situation could certainly have been worse than it was. I think Rangers and Steven Gerrard, when he does come back into the training ground and is back in with his squad again, he'll be looking back at the last few days and thinking that's gone an awful lot better than it could have done.
Andrew Anderson, so we rock up to Ibrox yesterday, and we're sitting in our cars or we're sitting in our pubs getting ready to make our way along to the ground, and your phone goes and it shows you the team lineups, and there's no Nathan Paterson, and starting at right back is Leon Balogun, and I put my hands up right now and say I was pretty gutted, because from memory, when he played right back a couple of times last season, he'd done okay, kind of tailed off a little bit, and hasn't started the season particularly well in his native position at centre half. He really shut me up yesterday, didn't he?
I think he shut everybody up. I don't think there was many people who were delighted to see him there. In fact, I think I texted you. I was on the train actually, just about to pull into Partick to get the subway when I seen the team. I think I texted you saying this could be a long day.
You did.
This could be a long afternoon. How wrong was that? How wrong was everybody? It was immense, absolutely immense. I'll be honest, I kind of bought in to what him and Roof have both said since the game about ramming it down folks' throats or whatever it may have been what they said.
Yeah.
I kind of bought in after seeing the stats from Kyogo and what he could do. I thought this could be a long afternoon. They shut me right up. He was fantastic blocking, that tackle in the box, and then to break a way out from it, fantastic, utterly fantastic. The whole team were excellent yesterday, but when it comes to an old firm team announcement and you see somebody who's the COVID situation, Andrew went over there, that was always going to happen. There's going to be wee things happening here and there, but to see Balogun play it right back against Celtic in a game as a must win, they're all must wins, and to go into the international break after the defeat's a long fortnight, so as a must win, but to see that and then to witness what he done was fantastic.
Patrick, I think Balogun was excellent yesterday, as was Goldson, who needed a performance as well. I felt he led by example yesterday as captain. Big Phil sort of continues to impress every time he plays. I hope it's almost the last we've seen of this tinkering that we sometimes see, where he drifts off to the bench and Balogun comes in and then he's back for the week after. I think it's important that we go with a bit of rigidity there. But I want to highlight on Borna Barisic at left back. A lot of murmurs over when he was coming off. It could be his last game at the club. We don't know that for now. He had a period in the second half where his delivery after delivery was really, really impressive. And if we do lose Borna Barisic on Tuesday on deadline day, he'll be a loss. He'll be very, very hard to replace.
Yeah, I think the perfect example, I mean, Borna always does it, but you saw in the second half he made a concerted effort to rile up the crowd, using his hands to get everyone loud, which is, I mean, if every fan should love that, and he's done it on many occasions. But it did coincide with an uptick in form. You could say he started a bit shaky, much like the whole team. Celtic were dominating, though he is a left back. The position has sort of evolved into which you're expected to go forward, especially we were playing what appeared to be a 4-3-1-2 with Kent central as opposed to with him and Roof on the out wide, and with Balogun playing at right back, he was never going to go beyond and offer an overlapping run. So Barisic was effectively the main creative wide threat, so everything that was going to go into the box was going to go through him. So there was a lot of pressure on him, and his delivery certainly improved in the second half. And I think he defended well. I think just looking at some of the Celtic people I follow, Leila Bada came up for a lot of, perhaps not criticism, but he just did nothing. Not that he did anything poorly, but he didn't see the ball at all. Okay. And that was part maybe due to his lack of experience. He's quite young, but also because Barisic did a really good job. He didn't even have to tackle him. I think he did a good job in marking him and harrying him out of the game, so that Abada was rarely an option. And much like Balogun with Kyogo, which I was immensely, very impressed with. When the lineup was released, the defensive thing was never a worry because Balogun's pure defensive ability is far better than Tammy or Paterson's, but it's, again, that would have this unsymmetrical attack in which it would owe it, because if you think of the 4-3-3, we have two sort of wide 10s who are naturally quite narrow, but when you change it to two up top, we're going to have no width and all of it would have to come from the fullbacks. But I think Balogun was fine when in possession. He played quite safe, which was all that was needed, and I think reassured, because if you were seeing him spraying balls, some people would get a bit scared. I think he played his role really well and epitomized everything that you wanted from him, a good old firm performance. It wasn't the prettiest, but his tackling was great, and it was really, really good to see 7 or 8 just perfectly timed slide tackles. I think someone could clip and make a compilation to some sort of song and get thousands of likes on Twitter.
It's funny you say that. The guy that sits in front of me at the game said he can't remember a game when he's been at Ibrox where there's been so many, particularly an Old Firm game, where there's been so many players who have went to ground and came away with the ball. Andrew Dickson, I thought Liam Balogun was really impressive yesterday. As I say, left me with tons of egg in my face. He was really, really good. It was a great performance for him.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I was a bit concerned myself when I saw he was playing right back because I can't remember what the games were last season. I think there was a game against Dundee United where he was right back. Is that the one where there was another one where just before that he'd been really good and then he played a second game? I thought I might be getting mixed up. I thought it was a United game where he played well and then the next game he played badly. But there were 2 games where he was great. In the first one, he thought, actually, this is quite decent. And then it wasn't in the next one. And, I was a bit concerned about what we might see because you're right, he hasn't been, as has been the case for most of the team, he hasn't been quite what you'd want him to be so far this season. But, yeah, he was terrific. Really, really good. Committed. And, played a big part in what I heard earlier on today described as a makeshift defence, but it's not really that makeshift. Yeah. You've got your first choice central pairing and you've got your left back who found his form again a little bit in the game at the weekend. So Balogun is a Nigeria international at the end of the day. That's hardly a makeshift. And he's an experienced guy as well who's played in Germany and England and what have you. Sure, he's not the first choice, but he slotted into that defence very well. And I've got to say, Robbie McCrory, I touched on him earlier on against Alkirk. It wasn't until a couple of minutes after the goal that he was called into action where he came off his line to deny Kyogo, and I thought he handled that well. Obviously a really good save towards the end as well with his foot from Kyogo. But even prior to that, on the occasions where he wasn't necessarily called upon as such, but when he was involved in the game, if it's a pass back and he's launching it upfield or whatever he's doing, he looked so composed and assured throughout. There wasn't a moment where I thought, he looks a bit out of place here. He looked very natural in that position and very natural in that team and very natural in that environment. And that bodes really, really well for the future. We might not see him again play this season, it might be he plays a Scottish Cup game away to East Fife or whatever, and that might be it. That might be all for McCrory in the first team this season. But I thought it was terrific. I
think it's funny you say that though, because I'm sure Gary Mack referenced that in his pre-match presser last week, didn't he? I mean, he spoke about how Robbie McCrory has really impressed since he rocked back at the start of the season, both mentally and physically. He's well tuned in. They certainly rate him highly in there.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Gary did say that last week, that they've noticed a real difference. He's walking around with his head up a little bit more and integrating with people a bit more. And he's maybe not the shy kid. I mean, he's not a kid anymore, No, he's been around for a while. Him and Ross, who's obviously moved on to Aberdeen. I mean, Ross was involved in the first team for a couple of seasons, I think, before he... and that was... obviously take into account the loan spells that he had as well, So Robbie's been out to Morton and Queen of the South. I think there's one other as well. So Livingston, obviously.
Livingston, yeah.
He has got plenty of experience under his belt now for his age, and it's difficult for him to get ahead. I mean, certainly ahead of Alan McGregor, I'm sure. he will feel that he can give John McLaughlin a run for his money for maybe the backup option in that squad at the moment. But I certainly think longer term, and I've thought this for a while anyway, that Robbie will be the long-term number one. He's done his cause absolutely no harm whatsoever with a really big week because, 2 games where we needed results, and against Alashkert and Celtic, he keeps clean sheets and does everything he needs to do. He can't have done any more.
Absolutely. Patrick, I'll come to you next. Filip Helander never fails to disappoint for me. I've said for, I think, the last couple of seasons how I personally think he's the best defender we've got. And it was some header to really put the difference between ourselves and Celtic yesterday, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think if I was a Celtic fan, I'd be going away about either who they have at the club that does their set piece tactics, or if they have one, fire them, and if they don't, hire one. Because I think it must have been genuinely in the last 7 Old Firms, I think it was 4 or 5 of our goals have come from either crosses, whether it be aerial or grounded, or corners, which is just a seriously either negligible or just terrible rate. And they've replaced their defenders. Sarfelt came in and was supposed to be a better aerial presence than Ayer, but I was very impressed. Helander's not the most elegant on the ball, but I mean, what epitomised his addition and value to the team, I think, was when Goldson touched the ball on, and then Kyogo, Edouard ran forward, and then Helander was able to jockey him and let him win the ball. His positioning is fantastic. He's slow, but he doesn't really need to be fast. I mean, if he was fast, given the attributes he has now, he wouldn't be playing at Rangers. He'd be at a far higher level. But I think when it comes to textbook defending, there's no better at the club. And I think in a game in which we had this weekend in which we didn't dominate possession, where we're not expecting our centre-backs to hold possession for upwards of 20% of the game, it was the perfect game for him, and the game in which he showed all that he can do.
Andrew Anderson, I'll come to you next. We speak with quite a bit of regularity on the podcast about Stephen Davis. And I actually didn't think Stephen Davis played particularly well in the first half. I didn't think any of our midfielders were that great in the first half because I felt Celtic kept the ball better than us, to be perfectly honest. However, in the second half, and particularly I would say maybe the last 15 minutes or so, he was like something possessed. He was absolutely everything to us in the last sort of 10 minutes of the game. Just held us together, kept us fluid, and saw us through the final whistle, didn't he?
Yes, he does, and that's not unlike him. He does it very regularly, as you know. First half, I did think he was a wee bit out of sorts.
Yeah,
but he wasn't alone. He wasn't alone in being out of sorts. I don't know if to put that down to. Nothing really can put that down to Celtic, or just they held the ball better than us and they retained possession better than us in the first half. But the second half, as time wore on, I mean, you need people like Stephen Davis to do their job. He kept doing it. I mean, we all seen it. Was it the last 5 minutes? He intercepted the pass and he was bobbing forward like a 21-year-old. You know, he could have probably that on himself, but he passed it over to Sakala, who I thought was a wee bit. He should have maybe a shot a wee bit earlier, and to the keeper's far side. But no, watching Steve Davis do that week in, week out is just it's a pleasure. And he definitely get better as the game went on.
Andrew Dickson, we obviously know about the importance of having big senior players at the club. We're lucky that we do have Alan McGregor and Stephen Davis for a game of that magnitude yesterday. I don't think you can underestimate the importance of Stephen Davis just holding everything together as we move into the sort of dying embers of the tie. It was really good to see him just sort of maintain everything for us, I felt.
Well, the thing is as well, you talk about big senior players. What they have done probably is really help a lot of other players in that squad become big senior players. But they're not really that senior in terms of age. I mean, obviously Davis and McGregor are both in the twilight of their careers. I mean, Alan is 40 in January, and Stephen obviously is edging towards his late 30s now as well. But you know, after that, like see your Goldsons and I mean Tav's around 29, 30 now, I think. So he's starting to get on a little bit, but I think he's kind of like the next one coming into his 30s. After that, as I say, Goldson, Helander's about kind of late 20s as well. There are a lot of players in there who are kind of old beyond their years, if that makes sense. You know, I mean, Kamara as well looked a bit more like himself yesterday. I thought he was poor against Alashkert, Kamara. But on occasions yesterday. I thought he did really well, and I thought in the second half Rangers really stepped up their levels. So that influence that Davis and McGregor have in that squad has really rubbed off on a lot of other players, and you saw a lot of the players out there after the break taking responsibility and really driving the performance on. One thing I would say as well, I mean, I saw, I tend not to rise to this kind of thing too much, but I saw Chris Sutton tweeting about...
Who?
I know. Tweeting about possession. And it was a bit of a dig at Rangers. It was like, oh yeah, they really rose to the occasion. 34% possession. Games are not won in possession. I mean, we've all been around long enough to know that. Celtic very famously had, 19% or less than 19% possession against was it maybe even 11% against Barcelona, and won at Celtic Park years ago, right? So I mean, 99 times out of 100, if you play that game, it's a Barcelona win. But on that one occasion, it was Celtic that won it. Rangers, with their possession yesterday, so they've had a third of the ball, but they played through the lines a lot better. They have been far more incisive. And Celtic, you can knock the ball about at the back all you want. That's an area where Rangers are quite happy for Celtic to have the ball. They're not going to trouble them there. So possession means absolutely nothing. It's a bit, at the moment with COVID, it's a bit like saying, there's 35,000 new infections. It's like, that doesn't really mean anything. How many people are hospitalised?
Yeah.
When you're talking about statistics, you need to talk about what are relevant statistics. Possession yesterday, that's not relevant. The only relevant statistics from the game yesterday are Rangers 1, Celtic 0. And for Rangers now, there is an opportunity for them to build on that, because they'll have players coming back in. I think the international break, even with the victory, has come at a good time for them. I think they probably need a little bit of a breather, because that first month of the season has been 9 games and, a tricky run of matches as well. Celtic, if you listen to their supporters going into this game, great. So you've beaten St Mirren and Dundee 6-0. Fantastic, right? But we can all do that. We can all get results like that, and not just Rangers and Celtic. There's other teams in the league that can get results like that too. The games that are important are the Old Firm derbies, your games against your Dundee United away, Aberdeen, Hearts, Hibs. That's your big matches, and that's the ones where we really have to do something. Now, Rangers, I believe, will go from strength to strength and will get better. Celtic fans, to an extent, have been talking as though they're the finished article already. I don't believe for 1 minute that they think that. I think they know fine well that there's still work there to be done. But I think they've got a bit ahead of themselves. And Celtic have still got an awful lot of work to do. They've got a lot of players to integrate into that squad, and they'll hit bumps in the road, and they've already hit bumps in the road. It's Postecoglou's start is the worst by a new Celtic manager for 20 years in the league. 2 defeats in the first 4, So, they are playing great football at times, Celtic, when they come forward. Of course they are. Kyogo Furuhashi has made a really good start. Abada's made an impression at times as well. They've got potential there, but our concern on this podcast is Rangers, and I think Rangers have shown themselves that even in a sticky spell where they've been quite leggy and they look a bit lethargic and they've not really looked fully fit, whereas in previous seasons it's been quite the opposite. Like last season they started extremely well and looked very, very well tuned from the very start. I think despite the difficulties that there have been for Rangers, They've got themselves in a decent position in the league, 9 points from 4 games, not bad. They're into the Europa League. They've won the first Old Firm game of the season, and that's them playing badly or not playing as well. So there's a real platform to move forward from now. And you mentioned it earlier on about the tinkering. This seems to be one of the things that Steven Gerrard does, where at the start of the season he rotates certain players. I would imagine that comes down to just... It might be something, and particularly with the Euros being on in the summer, it might be just different players being at different points.
Freshness almost.
But building their fitness as well after the summer. And who's had a holiday later than another one, like Borna Barisic has obviously been at the Euros, whereas Connor hasn't. So Goldson has had time off earlier on, and so on and so forth. So I'd imagine that is part of the reasoning behind what's happened there. But I'd imagine also what you said earlier on, we're now at the point where that settles down and you see more of a settled lineup. And I think Rangers, probably based on the first few weeks of the season, will benefit from having a settled lineup. And you would like to think that with the consistent team selection will come more consistent results and performances as well.
Andrew Anderson, we speak a lot in the pod about the staunchness, for want of a better term or phrase, of our support. The support yesterday were on another planet. Now, it makes a difference being in the ground with no Celtic support. I think everyone appreciates that. There's no two ways about it. But the noise within the place yesterday was as loud as I think I'd heard it in recent times. We spoke off camera, and I know you remember the night Nerlinger scored against Stuttgart at Ibrox. I remember the Parma, the night we played Parma at Ibrox, when the atmosphere was just absolutely incredible. But yesterday, it was a real, I don't know how to it was a real sort of, it was a proud noise type thing, if that makes sense. There was a real sort of passion about what we were there for and what we were watching. We were so proud of the team to get the result in the end. And the noise, it would have taken the roof off if there was a roof over the top of the place yesterday.
I totally agree, Scott. The noise was fantastic. It all boils down to, I think, the first game back I went to was Livingston at home. There was only 23,000 of us there. The noise was excellent. They say there was only 23,000. I think there was more. I think there might have been more. The noise was excellent that day. And then, of course, comes the first Old Firm game since we were allowed back. So the staunchometer, if you like, which you mentioned, that goes up again, because if you remember last year, the 4 games we played Celtic, we played well, and particularly, I think I mentioned it to you before, the 4-1 game, the last game of the season, that could have had 5 or 6 had there been 50,000 of us in there. I quite believe that. Yeah. And the noise that would have been round when Defoe scored that game would have been comparable to yesterday. So I think that's partly to do with it was the fact that a year of not being there, and we'll show you exactly how loud we can be. And of course, celebrating being champions as well. Albeit there was no Celtic fans there, but they're all watching. That's why there was tifos, which was excellent as well to see.
Yeah, it was.
I didn't have the best angle of it where I was sitting yesterday, but I could still see it well enough. It was excellent to see. But no, the staunchometer definitely raised a few levels yesterday. Quite funny. Andrew was saying a minute ago there about it's good to go into these breaks after an Old Firm win. Of course it is. I came home yesterday and my wife had said to me, she said she's seen the league table. She says, there's 2 questions I've got to ask. She says, why are Hearts and Hibs at the top? And how have you only played 4 games? You've been at Ibrox 8 times. Because of the amount of football we've had to play between Europe and all the rest of it, so I fully understand her question. But yesterday's noise was fantastic, Scott, it really was.
Patrick, sorry, Andrew.
Scott, if you don't mind, I think the fans deserve quite a lot of credit, because I wasn't at the game. Obviously, I'm based down in London, but I have many friends who were at the game. There has been a bit of focus on the incident that happened in Glasgow City Centre, which I think was before the game at Jamaica Street, and I can understand that. But if you look at the fans who were within the ground and the behaviour of supporters within the ground, I think, and this comes partly from the club has done a lot of work itself, but the fans have taken responsibility too with coming up with new songs, and the songbook has really cleaned up massively. And even if you go back to 5 years ago, it's far better now than it was then. I kind of had not a blow-by-blow account, but I had a run-through of what happened yesterday through the game, and overwhelmingly the majority of noise that was coming from people was the right kind of noise, if you want to call it that. And I think the fans deserve an awful lot of credit. Rangers, you've seen Rangers with the updating of the club badge and the enhanced branding. Rangers are trying to move forward as a club, and you see things like the new LED boards around the stadium, which makes it look like a more modern arena. To an extent as well. They're trying to modernise in every way they possibly can, and the fans, I think, have taken responsibility for that as well, in terms of trying to move with the times, accepting maybe what might have been deemed as okay in the past. I'm loath to use the word acceptable, because I think some of the songs personally, and it is a personal view only, I don't speak for anyone else, but personally I think some songs haven't been acceptable in the past. Others might disagree with that, but I think regardless, I think there's recognition from the supporters that there are certain songs that perhaps don't do the club any favours, and don't help with regards to where the club is trying to get to. And some of the songs that are out there now are cracking songs as well, I've got to say, really enjoyable, make a good noise. And I think you really saw that yesterday at Ibrox as well with the supporters. Certainly, I mean, I only watched it on TV. I was working on the game from afar, cutting highlights of it, and the noise really came across, and it came across as a tremendous atmosphere.
I'm really, really glad that you brought that up, because I think too many times we get kicked about the place for not behaving ourselves. That sounds rubbish, because we're football fans and we should be obviously doing that. But I think we do have the problem. We've seen it today on social media. Too many, and I'll say it so you don't have to take responsibility for it, MSPs are suddenly finding the volume for their hearing aids when their team get beat. And from a Rangers support perspective, it's completely unacceptable, because what we seek is one thing, and it's parity. If we're going to get stick for singing certain songs, naughty songs with rubbish words, which we all, I think, abhor, and we certainly don't support, that has to work the other way. And we've all seen it, and we've all heard it. It has to work two ways, and it has to be picked up in exactly the same manner it's picked up against ourselves as a support. Don't really want to say a huge deal about it. My take on it, certainly. Patrick, big day tomorrow, transfer deadline day. I'm sure you'll have many, many jewels in European football that Rangers should be and perhaps maybe looking at. I think I'll start with an easy one. Who can we not afford to lose tomorrow?
Well, I think there's a pretty obvious hierarchy of value to the club. And I think that's based on a few factors: importance of the tactical scheme, age, and the actual value you're going to get. The two names that seem to be banded around most are two fullbacks, Nathan Paterson and Borna Barisic. And I think I tweeted, I did a thread on when there was murmurs around the Barisic sort of emotions post-game, that if you were going to lose one of the quote-unquote big players, so you think like Goldson, Tav, Barisic, Kent, Morelos, Kamara, it'd probably be Barisic, just because his age profile, he's turning 29 soon. This is probably the last time which you could get like a considerable fee for him, and given the fact that Bassi has looked quite promising, if we were to lose Barisic, I would be far from comfortable with not bringing in another man. I would be more than happy to give Bassi a try, but I think with Aribo being our only sort of backup option if he were to go down injury, I think we need to get someone. The Paterson thing is interesting. I know a lot of the people in the sport want to see a local lad come to the academy play in the first team, but I think his path is naturally blocked by Tavernier. And also I think a lot of people somehow see if Paterson goes for a decent fee as against all the work that the academy does, but I think it'd be a vindication of all that's good in the academy, because an academy graduate plays 15 games that gets sold for double digit in the £1 million. That would probably pay for the academy's upkeep for a decade or two. It would be the dream in which perhaps you might not win the league, play tons of years at Rangers, but it's that, or you go into bigger and better things. I know it might be hard to say as a Rangers fan that there are bigger and better things than playing at Ibrox, but to be realistic and to have an outward view, going to the Premier League, playing probably a considerable amount of minutes if he does go, because I'm not unsure of Everton's right back sort of depth, but I know Seamus Coleman, and it must be close to calling his time. But I think in terms of who we can't lose, I would say Kamara is the one for me. Kamara, I don't think Morelos and Kent, there's no murmurs, but I think there was some idea of Everton, Newcastle, West Ham looking around Kamara, and he's the one who the individual who's had some sort of strenuous links throughout the last 3 months that we can't lose. I think he would be my last.
Andrew Dickson, I'll come to you next. I think we spoke off camera, and you know, we're very aware, we're obviously recording this on Monday evening, so you're very aware that everything can change after we say something tonight. So anything that we say is just one of these things. I think we have the situation just now where we know that Nathan Paterson is being studied and he's being looked at. I wonder if Rangers were to get an offer upwards of maybe 10, 12 million, would he disappear tomorrow, do you think?
I think so, yes. I'm not entirely sure exactly what the club's financial position is at the moment, but I get the feeling with the amount of marketing of every product going that the club, and listen, marketing people. I worked at the club for 7 years in the media department, and we worked very closely with the marketing department. The marketing department is there to help make the club money through marketing its products and,
of course,
bringing in advertising and various other things. So I'm certainly not going to sit here and criticise people for doing their jobs properly. But I think 40 minutes after the full-time whistle in the Old Firm game, there was an email in my inbox saying, celebrate the Old Firm game with some merchandise from the Rangers store. Now, on one hand, that's good marketing, that you're capitalising on an opportunity, a positive result, feel-good factor. Great. People are maybe more likely to part with their cash. But the club has felt, and I'm not saying this with any knowledge, I must stress, it has felt as though the club has really, really pushed everything an awful lot, which in the bigger picture says to me that there's a need to get money in from somewhere. And obviously certain people have stepped up over the course of time and offered loans and had money turned into shares and everything. But I do fear that there's probably still a need, particularly with not making the Champions League, to sell somebody. And Nathan Paterson, the potential that is there with Paterson is very, very clear. Similar situation to probably what Celtic had with Kieran Tierney, who they sold for 25 million, and if he'd stayed for another season or two, they might have got more than that. It's a similar situation probably for Rangers with Paterson. If he comes in and he plays regularly, then his value is only going to go up. But is he going to play regularly? At the moment, he's not, because of Tavernier. Now, that's not a criticism at all of James Tavernier. Is there a way to fit both of them into the team where you play one further up? Potentially, but that changes everything about the way Rangers are set up at the moment. So you could almost take it with Paterson as though, well, you've not really got much to lose in the playing side because you've not really had him. He's only played 15, 20 games at most. So you don't really lose very much because he's not been around for very long. But if you get 10, 12 million pounds, then it's going to be so difficult to turn that down. What Patrick was saying about Barisic as well, if you're getting offered, similar sort of money for him as a guy who is starting to sort of get beyond his traditional peak, if you like, sort of peak age. That's another one. I agree entirely with the need to keep hold of Kamara. Rangers without Glenn Kamara, and particularly with the fact that Stephen Davis is potentially going to retire at the end of the season. Rangers without Kamara as well, that's an enormous hole to fill. And there are other midfielders there. Joe Aribo is going to keep prospering over the course of time. I expect him to push on again this season. Ryan Jack, if he can get himself fit and keep himself fit, then he'll be another asset for the team. Young Stephen Kelly, it looks as though he's going to stay rather than go out on loan, which I think is a reflection of the esteem that he's held in by the coaching staff. So there are other people there on top of Arfield as well, and Bakuna's just come in too. So, there are lots of options, but Kamara's the golden goose. If you lose Kamara, you lose an awful lot from that team. Morelos, I mean,
he'll never leave.
We've been round and round this so many times with Alfredo, and yet he's still here. And I've got to say, I don't know because we've been through the roller coaster so many times with him. I don't know what my opinion is anymore on whether it's. I kind of thought at the end of last season it'd be a good time for him to go, just in the sense that he would leave with a lot of goodwill. If he wanted to leave, that was the time to do it and get himself a move quickly. I actually thought Alfredo Morelos was Rangers' best player in the second half of last season. From the Old Firm game where he drew the foul from Beaton onwards, I thought he was Rangers' standout performer. But I also thought it was maybe a good time for him to go. Now, well, he's scored another important goal against Alashkert, which ultimately has got us into the group stage of the Europa League. And even his performance at the weekend, actually, he didn't do an awful lot in front of goal, but I thought there are 2 or 3 occasions that spring to mind straight off the top of my head where he was very, very good at drawing fouls. He does so well getting his body in positions where somebody then gives him a little bump, down he goes, clever free kick to win. And that kind of experience is pretty valuable in those occasions. So, Morelos, it looks far more likely he's going to stay than leave in this window. I'd be hugely surprised if he was one of the ones to go. I'd be less surprised if Barisic, Paterson, possibly Ryan Kent left as well. I don't think they'll all leave, obviously, but I think they're the contenders that could go. But, the prospect of, they've already won the league, Rangers. The prospect now for those players is to retain it in front of fans. They've not won a league in front of fans before, so that is still quite a big incentive, perhaps a bigger incentive than it would have been had last season been in front of fans. So the chance to maybe go a bit further in the Europa League, or to certainly to try to, there are still big incentives there. So anybody who does leave, and if it turns out that the Barisic tears, which Gary McAllister told people after the game, it was because of a moment of realisation, because he saw what he could do. I'm inclined to take Gary at face value, but part of me does have a little bit of doubt about that. If it turns out that those tears were because he's off to Roma, it's going to be with a heavy heart that he'll go, and I think a lot of the players would be the same if they were to move on. I don't think anybody is willingly looking to leave Rangers. The one maybe that does fall into that category has been Morelos, where on and off he's tried to get his move and it hasn't happened for whatever reason. So, but I certainly would put him in a minority. I don't think there are many others who would be looking to get out the door, and especially off the back of an Old Firm win and all the potential that lies ahead over the next few months.
Andrew Anderson, the guys sort of covered the bodies that we think may or may not be on the radar of other clubs, and may indeed sort of leave the club. Is there any areas that you think we still need to strengthen for this season, do you think?
All depends what happens tomorrow, in my opinion, Scott. I would be more than happy to go as is at the moment. Yeah. I really would be, with what he's done so far. Obviously, it was Patrick that touched on it there, saying if Borna was to go tomorrow, you need some cover for Calvin Bassey. That's a no-brainer. You can't rely on Aribo having to fall back in there should he get injured. If Paterson goes, you've got a few options there if Tavernier was to get injured in the future, or another COVID situation. You don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. But no, as it stands at the moment, I would be quite happy to go as is. Quite happy to go as is at the moment.
Ideal. Andrew, listen, I appreciate you coming on again. We'll get you on in the next couple of weeks. Thanks for joining us. Andrew Anderson, sorry, I should say.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, mate. Cheers.
And Patrick, thanks again for joining us. Always good to have you on, my friend. Well done.
Thank you very much.
And Andrew Dickson, always a pleasure, my friend. I'll certainly look forward to having you on again a couple of times, hopefully, between now and the end of the season.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me on.
So I should say, if you are following us on this Ibrox and across the social media, on your Instagram and your Twitter, we're everywhere just now. I should say, try and jump on our YouTube and follow us and like us and subscribe. Leave your comments to the pod, by all means, particularly for the nice ones. We always like the nice ones. And we will do it all again, I think, on Thursday. The guys are doing a sort of report card type thing. So Graham Falk will be joined by another three guys from the This Ibrox stable, and they'll cover the 9-10 games that we've played so far this season, and just give us a wee rundown on how well we're doing. We think we're doing. I will be back in a fortnight or so, and we look forward to that. We'll look forward to the big first Europa League game of the campaign, Lyon Ibrox, which is something to be really excited about. So we look forward to that. Thanks very much. See you next time. Bye-bye.